All right, guys, well, welcome back to U.S. History with Mr. DeCecco. So today we're going to take a peek at what's happening in America after World War One. So we're looking at, kind of the 1917, 1918, end of the war, 1919, and then we're going to take you into the 1920s. The video after this will be on the Roaring Twenties, the actual kind of popping of the Roaring Twenties. So let's get it going. A couple things you see here, 1970, 1929, the Roaring Twenties is, the women, they were wearing shorter hair, their hemlines were taller, they were dancing and drinking, and these are going to be your flappers of the day. So let's get down to the basics here. So following World War One, our president, his name was Warren G. Harding. He called America. He said we're going to have a return to normalcy. Now, what did that mean? I mean, the war was over, and we're going to get back to kind of living in America. So our transportation systems, our communication systems were pretty much the best in the world, and they really united our nation. The traditional rural societies, that's kind of like your farming communities, they're really going to clash at this moment with the urban centers. Why? The urban centers where all the technology was and where all the action was, and the rural centers kind of lived a slower paced lifestyle, and they kind of wanted to stay traditional. So we're going to get into that. So urban, high standard of living, fast pace, all the technology. Rural, they're kind of still living the way they were in the late 1800s. Things were slower, very peaceful. So you have that contrast between urban and rural, right? If you need the vocabulary for the worksheet for my class, you can pause that screen and grab it, but I'm going to keep moving here. So what is the impact in the aftermath of the war? Well, many changes in American society, especially for three different groups predominantly, and that would be the women, immigrants, and African Americans. So we're going to take each group one by one. What is the effect on a woman and some of the other minorities? Well, their family responsibilities will increase because, of course, they were now working in factories plus maintaining the family as a unit. They contributed to the war as volunteers. There weren't any kind of separated, female units in the military, but they can serve in various ways as volunteers. They began during the war to join fields, and especially in factories and different industries that were traditionally dominated by men. But because men went off to war, around 4.1 million men went to World War One. Now women are going to have more opportunities. They definitely worked in places where people can help, and that would be the Salvation Army, and especially the Red Cross, and getting blood. After the war, the expectation was that the woman's role was to return home, take care of the family, and leave their jobs. Now, they weren't happy with that, but they did it, all right? So there you go. You got women working the Red Cross. After all that, it's time to go back home and take care of the family. So immigrants, there were no real new immigrants allowed entry during the war. We were afraid of those foreign influences. And, the foreign-born Americans, they're going to face discrimination, especially those from maybe, say, Germany and, maybe the Slavic countries, Austria-Hungarian Empire. And, so life for them during the war is not so good, all right? Major changes for a different group in our nation, that would be African Americans. So around 400,000 served in World War One. You should note that they served in segregated units. So there was all African American units and all white units. This will take place in World War II as well, and this will change by the time the Korean War comes around. Discrimination is very common in the jobs that they got, and even in the military. So they weren't really treated too nicely, which is kind of a sad part in American history. A lot of them migrated to the north. So there are reasons why they left the south, and moved to the north, predominantly getting those jobs, those factory jobs. And obviously what's going to push them out of the south would be discrimination, lynchings, the Klan activity. And this time period is known as the Great Migration. So between 1910 and 1930, over 2 million African Americans actually are going to move to the north. So they're going to move to those northern cities, all right? Great time period. Really a lot of changes in America. After World War One, so our economy during the war. Let's move on to what's really happening in the country for everyone. Our economy during the war really started to slow. Why? Well, during the war, we were producing a lot of products for that war, and now the war is over, so production is going to slow down a little bit. Well, the returning troops are going to have difficult times to make that adjustment. You had to come back from war and to become a regular civilian again. So that's interesting. Many of the women, many of the minority workers are going to lose their jobs. Why? Well, the expectation is that those people don't work and open those jobs up to the men who fought in the war. So kind of a bad time for those groups. Despite contributing to the war effort, returning African American troops still faced discrimination and segregation in both the North and the South. So that's what's kind of going on with the changes as the war ends. So death and destruction of war leads feelings of gloom among many Americans. I mean, there's a definite PTSD that arrives after that, and you come back from viewing those things. So in looking at our two presidents of the 20s, right? You have Warren G. Harding, and the guy who took over after Harding had a heart attack, and that would be Calvin Coolidge, right? So we're going to look at what happens while Harding is the president, and we'll move on to Coolidge. So Warren G. Harding is from Ohio. He becomes president. He is a Republican, and he puts a lot of his friends in government positions, and they're known as the Ohio Gang because they all came from Ohio. These are guys he played poker with, and they're pretty corrupt in terms of taking care of themselves and not really taking care of the country. So just going to give you a few examples of that, and then we can move on from that. So one example of theft would be one of Harding's buddies, who's the head of the Veterans Bureau, sold hospital supplies for personal profit. Well, he is going to go to jail, and he's fine, right? The alien property custodian sold a bunch of German artifacts, German property for himself, for private profit. That guy will go to jail. And then the most famous of all the scandals is the Teapot Dome scandal, and that is the Secretary of the Interior. Yeah, his name was Albert Fell. He took a bunch of money from oil companies and sold them government land in Wyoming so those companies could drill for oil. So he basically sold government property and kept the money for himself. So here's kind of a joke. This did not happen, but it's kind of a joke, right? If Harding was the president, he'd be willing to sell the Washington Monument, the Capitol building, even the White House, and him and his cronies, him and his Ohio gang would keep the money. So, well, Harding dies of a heart attack, and Calvin Coolidge takes over. He has his own slogan, keeping cool with Coolidge, and he relies on what's known as the laissez-faire approach, and that is he's going to kind of let the government flow, let businesses do what they do, and kind of take back some of the restrictions that were there. So what you have here is a nice little political cartoon of Coolidge where he is playing the sax, because the music back then was all the jazz, and the flapper, or this gigantic woman who's kind of dressed like a woman, but it's a guy. That's big business, and big business is dancing to the tunes because the president is letting them do whatever they want. So if you need the vocab for laissez-faire, you can pause that and get that down for the worksheet. But we were in a slight recession in the early 1920s. So why? Production is going to fall, farm income goes down, exports are going down because we're not supporting this war anymore, and unemployment is going to be on the rise in the beginning of the 20s. So then, right at the end of the 20s, this is your roaring 20s, there is a huge business boom. So 1923 to 1929, roaring 20s, GNP rose to 40%. Per capita income, people's incomes are rising by 30%. America's standard of living is going up. And we'll talk about the products later on in this presentation for you. Pro-business. This is your laissez-faire, right? Businesses and the rich were aided by tax laws that reduced their taxes. So what does that mean? Businesses are paying less taxes. The business owners actually have more capital. They have more money, right? Our national debt was actually reduced by a huge tariff. And that tariff really helped pay off our national debt, and we also had countries paying us for the things that we helped them with during the war. So America was looking good financially. The Federal Reserve Board, the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, and the Interstate Commerce Commission helped businesses instead of regulating them. You could look to that as a possible cause of the Great Depression. Not too many business regulations at this time. Even the Supreme Court got involved by aiding mergers, which increased production, and really this was a time period where businesses were allowed to do pretty much whatever they wanted. So we're gonna look at how that really affects the regular people now. So businesses were doing fine, but this economic boom is not going to hit everybody. So what happened to labor? Well, strikes dropped really sharply. You didn't see a lot of worker strikes in the Roaring '20s. Membership in the American Federation of Labor grew, so more people are joining labor unions. Wages for factories are going up, but not at the rate that we need to. Well, inflation wiped out any gain. So yes, you're making more money, but the products are costing you more money. So it looks like you're getting a raise, but in actuality, you're not, right? The Supreme Court ruled in favor of businesses, not against labor. So this was not a good time for labor. They wanted kind of production to flow. The workers could not really afford the products, the new consumer goods. So what you have is a lot of workers buying products on credit, right? Well, let's take a look at farmers. Farmers are always kind of in the hurt locker, and they're never really seeing the benefits from business. So large farms are going to benefit from Coolidge, but small farmers are going to be hurt. The new machinery and techniques to increase farm production were great, but they cost a lot of money, right? American farmers actually were so good at producing, they were producing too much. So the word you want to remember here is what? Overproduction. Farmers were producing too much. And what does that lead to? Farm income fell by over 50%. They're just not seeing the benefits. They're not making the money they need to. Farmers will lose their land. Farmers will lose their homes. And this is devastating for farmers in the 1920s. Well, Native Americans have never really seen a good showing from the federal government. And during the 20s, they had the highest unemployment rates. They still had the shortest lifespans, and some of them were still living on reservations without basic necessities. So this is kind of a bad time for Native Americans, right? What were the regular people doing? They were speculating. Speculation is when you buy stocks or you buy any product in the hopes that its price will go up. And this is great as long as the price goes up. If it doesn't, you're not going to be in a good place. So this speculation really will hinder the economic development of the 1920s. So investors enjoyed money during a bull market. Now, a bull market is a market that continues to go up. Prices for stocks are going up. So rising stock market, profits were rolling in for a while. Eventually, they're going to come down. So the other issue here is people bought stocks on what's called margin. They were buying stocks without paying the full price. So buyers could purchase stocks by making a small down payment in cash. But they borrowed money from people, investors, brokers, even banks, and they still owed the official number. And that system was working well as long as the price went up for the stocks. If it didn't, people owed that money back to the people they borrowed from, and if they didn't have it, banks will close, and we end up in the Great Depression. So you should know what buying on margin is, and this is a tough concept for kids, so I give you the vocabulary so you have it. Well, we're going to talk about mass consumption, and that is during the 1920s, after the war was over, people continued to buy products at a very fast rate, and that is mass consumption. So what is that? The huge quantities of manufactured goods were being made, they were available, and people were buying them, right? So you got, obviously you got the automobile was still a huge seller. And we're just going to look at the effects. I got a nice little chart here about products. So as we're producing more products, well, we need more steel, rubber, paint, glass, and oil. So those industries are growing. We have a new middle class now that's kind of moving out to suburbs, fueling a real estate boom, buying cars, and our country's building a bunch of roads, right? Increase in building of highways, decline in building railroads. We're building more streets, right? Tractors will replace, they're going to replace horses. The car will replace the horse. So you have kind of a new technology going. I'll let you read through that. The installment buying, it was pretty bad. People were buying products on credit, so they were buying products with money they didn't have. That's terrible, right? There was advertising agencies that really promoted you to buy their product. cities, expanded into larger cities, larger urban areas, and you kind of got some changes here because of the automobile. So the automobile is going to spur a lot of different changes in America, right? The electrical industry, by this stage of the game, 1920s, most cities, all of them had electricity. Some of our farming communities actually did not yet. So electricity will change homes, businesses, cities. Why? You don't need candles, lamps anymore. You can just flip the switch and have electric lights. Our business productivity is going to skyrocket because now you don't have to worry about a water wheel. You don't have to worry about burning coal. You don't have to worry about steam. You have a ready supply of electricity. That being said, we're going to get all new products. Products that we used to use can be replaced by electronic products, and some of them would be washing machines and stoves, vacuum cleaners, refrigerators, and irons, right? And people want these products, so that's going to stimulate, once again, buying them on credit. So some changes because of electricity. The last thing is technology in our culture, right? And that would be the radio and motion pictures. So the word here that I know kids struggle with, this helped erase regional differences and homogenize society. What does that mean? It means we're coming together to create a mass culture, meaning everybody was listening to the same music, listening to the same comedy shows, and it really brought us together. And that's what people were talking about as they began to engage in their daily lives. So as you look back on this presentation, there's some serious changes between the 19 teens in World War I moving into the 1920s. So you want to study those and be ready for any test questions on that. So if this helped you, great. If not, subscribe to my channel and watch some of the other videos so you can get ready. See you later.